All right, welcome to the You Inside You, the podcast where you discover how to know, recognize, and trust the voice of your true self. I'm Trina Schmidt, and I am so grateful to be here with you. If you've ever struggled with anxiety, being emotionally overwhelmed, or feeling like something inside of you just can't quite settle, this episode is for you. Today, I am joined with Stacey Uhrig, a certified trauma recovery coach, rapid transformational therapy practitioner, hypnotherapist, and the creator of the Calm Code, a framework that helps people heal anxiety from within. Stacey's work blends trauma-informed therapy, nervous system regulation, and subconscious transformation to help people finally feel calm, confident, and free. Her story and her approach are powerful reminders that you are not broken, and that healing begins with understanding what's really happening beneath the surface. So I am so excited to welcome you, Stacey, to You Inside You.
I'm so happy to be here.
I am really just going to dive right into understanding your concept of that you're not broken and why it's really important to understand what's happening. Tell me a little bit about that, and then I want to learn a little more about you.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about that message of people not believing that they're broken, because I think for better or for worse, when we're struggling with our mental health, when we're struggling with what I'm going to call psychological safety, that idea has been in my head a lot this weekend. I don't know why. We tend to do what we're supposed to do, right? So we say, okay, I'm not feeling great emotionally, mentally. I'm going to go see a therapist. And we end up getting diagnoses. Sometimes we get diagnosed with disorders like an anxiety disorder or depressive disorder. And I think it leaves people with this messaging and this narrative of there's something wrong with me, that I'm defunct or I'm disabled or I'm disordered or I'm deficient in some way. And I just know, based on my own lived experience through all of the training I've done, all the schooling I've done, all the space I've held for one-to-one clients, that, you know, when we have lived experiences that leave us feeling, going back to that psychological safety, unsafe, insecure, where we don't feel like we belong, or maybe our basic needs are not being met, it's impactful. And things happen inside of our body to keep us feeling safe or to keep us alert when we're not feeling secure. And it is my personal belief that we label that as anxiety. Or if we're in that space for too long, I think we drop and flop and we label that as depression. And I'm not saying that these are not things to be diagnosed with. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder in my 30s. But the reality is that it leaves people feeling like they're other, or that they're different, or there's something wrong with them, where I don't actually think there's something wrong most of the time. I think most of the time, we just haven't fully processed what it is that we experienced, closed the loop on it, and allowed our body to feel like it's okay to move forward and not be so braced all the time. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. I love that you're bringing in safety. I really love creating a platform for people where they just know that they're totally perfect as who they are. Whatever we're dealing with, it's just contrast in life showing up for us to help expand and grow. And whatever it is that we're facing, either inside or outside in our lives, is okay, and we can get through it.
Right.
And finding that or establishing that sense of safety is really, really important. Do you mind taking us kind of back into your life and understanding a little bit of how you were able to find that the true self, or recognizing the voice of your true self? Like, when did that start for you?
That's a really interesting question, because you're asking me, when did I hear the voice of my true self? I think that this is actually what got me in a lot of trouble growing up, because I grew up in a household for the first 11 years of my life that I'm going to categorize as being really safe, really secure, really just a really great household, a great home. And a number of events happened where that got fractured around the time that I was turning 11 or 12. And then I ended up living the next 8 years in an environment that felt less secure, less whole, where I could not feel like I could just be me. And so I found myself fighting because I was actually connected to myself in the sense that I had a very strong sense of safety and what should feel right and what should not. And I was bumping up against that and I was calling it out. So I actually didn't lose a sense of myself. I think that that's actually very unique. But I was kind of being asked to ignore myself. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I've actually never really thought about it this way until you've posed this particular question. But I think this is what got me a lot of labels of being difficult, being a problem child, being, a pot stirrer. But the reality is I was, in my opinion, a truth speaker. And I wasn't willing to turn down the voice in my head that was my truth, which I think was very rooted in myself. And I was kind of being asked to abandon myself, abandon my needs for the greater whole, if that makes sense. Keep the peace.
Yeah,
like, just submit and subdue.
Yeah, you can just turn it down a bit,
and that's not me. That's not my natural instinct. And so it really, it's so interesting you asked me that question, because I've never really stopped to think about it, but I knew it as soon as you said it. Like, this was probably my, I'm putting in quotes, problem. And then, I did have a part of me that was very hypervigilant that I had never recognized before. And I really never needed it in the first half of my life. So there was kind of that inner fight with that part. But I actually always knew where I was. It's just that anxiety was always louder, or got louder than me for a large period of my life.
So let me ask you this. Did it get you in trouble in any way? Because sometimes when we do have those labels and we're asked to change, we kind of maybe go more to the extreme and say, well, I'll show you, and maybe kind of ego kicks in and takes over. Did it get you in any trouble that kind of was misaligned from yourself?
It did not. And this is really a great interview, because you're making me think about a lot of things. My grandparents were like my like stable guiding light, right? And my grandfather used to say things to me all the time, like, I'm so proud of you for not fill in the blank. He would say all different kinds of things, but basically alluding to what you're saying, like going over to this extreme space. And he said nobody would have been surprised. And I'm always so surprised. He goes, I'm actually so proud of you. And so I think he really wanted to support that I was making good decisions. I've never been a person that's lived in extremes. It's just, it actually makes me really feel uncomfortable to think about going into big extremes like that. I mean, for sure, this did not get me in trouble, but as a teenager, I was definitely drinking. I was definitely smoking cigarettes, because that was kind of the nicotine of choice at the time. But I never did anything in excess. I wasn't an excess person. So to your point, it didn't get me in trouble.
Yeah.
My biggest challenge was my mouth. I was just always willing to say what I was seeing and speaking up and not filtering and going to anyone that was willing to hear it. And that's where I, quote unquote, was getting myself in trouble, because other people didn't like that.
Yes. So you were seeing a lot of protesting and a lot of people kind of judging you or try to turn you down in that sense. So being really true to yourself from a very young age, how did that help shape your life?
Well, I guess, when you're going through it, you don't really know that it's shaping your life. But I think when you have a strong sense of self, you have confidence and you have a sense of self-worth, even when someone's trying to chip away at it. And so that was very impactful. That's how it impacted my life, because I didn't buy into the narratives, and I didn't buy into it. And again, it made me come across as this very strong-willed person. But really, I was just in survival, using my best technique, which was my voice, to try to guide me through. But it influenced me in a way, because I never lacked that confidence. That stuck with me. And that was probably like my best guiding light through everything.
Yeah. And now you are a podcast host, and you definitely speak out your truth and help a lot of people with, sending the message of people not broken, and trauma-enforced approach to healing people from within. So talk to me a little bit about how that journey started for you, you helping people, and then also being a host and being able to use your voice in this powerful way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who are in the space that you and I are in kind of start the same way. I think when we're growing up and we're going through these experiences, and we're gaining knowledge, and we're not aware, right? Like, even the circumstances we're in, we know that they're kind of messed up, but like, we really, especially in the 80s, like, there was no language in the 80s around any of this at all. Like, there was no self-awareness of having confidence and all of this different stuff. But I must have had some energy that attracted people to coming to me when they were in trouble, coming to me when they were in struggle, coming to me when they were in contemplation and they didn't know what to do. I just naturally drew people to me, and that started at a young age. That started in high school. I became someone that people sought out in college, and then that definitely got bigger and bolder as I got into my career. And I would actually have an office where people could come in and close the door during a work day and just sit down and like almost word vomit something that's going on in their life. And somehow I always knew what to say. I always knew how to guide it. And, no matter what I was going to go through during the workday, I always knew that that was going to be an element of it. And I never knew how much of my day it was going to consume, but it was always my favorite part of my day. I was good at it. And I had always said, oh, I missed my calling. I should have been a therapist, or I just naturally had this thing that people were attracted to and felt, going back to what we said before, psychologically safe to come and bring it to me. Through like every job I ever had, that remained. And so when I was in my mid 40s, I was like, I have to find a way to do something with this, because this gives me life. Like, this feels like I'm in my purpose. I'm in my flow when I'm doing this. If I could do this as just my career, this would be a dream. So I went back to school to formalize that, and to be able to gain maybe some knowledge that I didn't have, right? And how to work with people and how to hold space. And then I went and formally really gained a large amount of knowledge just in the space of trauma. And that's kind of how I brought it all to the surface. I just kind of followed what I had always naturally been very, very good at, and what people sought me out for. And then once I built my coaching practice, it just was a natural extension for me to take what I knew to be true and find this wider kind of, one-to-many platform where I could be sharing with people the things that I knew were helping my clients in their one-to-one sessions.
Stacey, it's just incredible how your road to helping people has just been so fascinating, and really staying true to yourself, which is what this podcast is all about. creating that safety people. But first of all, I just feel like you're human first. You show up as who you are, and your deep compassion for helping people see the same.
I think that that's the point. It's like when people see them, I always say we have these lived experiences, right? And you and I both know the lived experiences 0 to 3 are very, very impactful. And then that 0 to 7, 0 to 9, 0 to 11, whatever that I've heard so many different studies at different ages, but definitely by the time you're 11, they say that you have your core beliefs formed. And I love to tell my clients, think of your core beliefs as the lens through which you see yourself, others, and the world around you. So your core belief is either I'm worthy or I'm not worthy. It doesn't have to be that black and white, but I'm just giving examples. Or it's my job to make sure everybody around me feels happy, or it's not my job. Right. And so for whatever reason, however I was blessed in this world, I had this very strong sense of self, and I didn't have a lot. I'm not saying I didn't have any. I just didn't have a lot of limiting core beliefs that were distracting me from being rooted to myself. I always was rooted to myself, and that was really good. When anxiety overrode my life, which it did for 30 years, there was no part of me where my anxiety was driven by this sense of I'm not enough, or there's something wrong with me, or, having this hypervigilance of making sure everybody else around me. It was not about deprioritizing my needs. I think the level of anxiety I had, I refer to it as an emotional imprint. I often call it like a smoke alarm that has a faulty battery, right? Where for me, it wasn't a set of limiting core beliefs that was creating the anxiety. It was having lived in an unpredictable environment from those ages of 12 until 20, that my body ran into this survival mode way ahead of me meaning like myself. I was just like along for the ride. And my body shifted gears into this hypervigilance mode that never allowed itself to turn off. And that was very confusing for me, actually, because while I was going through these experiences that I was going through, there was a very strong messaging in my head of, I know it's not me. And it actually kind of made me feel crazy. Like I would legitimately call friends and say, I feel like I'm going crazy, because I was being told it was me. But I knew it wasn't me. And I do believe strongly, after everything I've studied, I always questioned, how did I have that level of resilience and understanding? And I think it's because 0 to 11 were so secure. That is not lost on me. And it's a real testament to understanding how important that sense of security and attachment with yourself is in childhood. Because when these things presented themselves to me in teenage years, early adulthood and mid adulthood, if I did not have that strong sense of self, the soil would have been ripe for the planting of seeds that would have not been appropriate, right? So I bring up that analogy because I'm doing a book club week by week of the different chapters of the 4 agreements right now. And we were talking about how when somebody gives you their opinion of you, you either latch on to it because we believe it to be true, or we reject it. And I always rejected it. And I never understood why, actually, until I really went deeper into the science and the studies and really started to understand how these core beliefs are formed and how our sense of self is formed. And I always knew mine was strong. So I know for me personally, and I think it's important for people that struggle with anxiety to understand that there can be these different entrance points. And for me, that entrance point really had much more to do with my autonomic nervous system being kind of left on an on position.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I really love your analogy with this, faulty smoke alarm, because I think a lot of people can really relate to the fact that we feel so confused of why we're
So
doing certain
confused.
things, and we tend to judge ourselves, even criticize ourselves, or feeling very perplexed of, well, why am I doing this, and why is this happening to me? And that's not really me. I can certainly personally relate to this. And growing up with a anxious attachment style personally, I know how critical the first 7 years of life is, and how unstable it can really create your worldview. And I work with so many people who really believe that that's life, right? Our faulty nervous system and things firing at times where we're really not supposed to. It really changes how you view the world.
And I think this is so important too. And Gabor Mate, I'm going to use the title of his book because it's just such a good title. This idea of the myth of normal. Okay. So I think part of what's so confusing for people is when I'm going to use the word trauma, but we don't have to use this word. Okay. And I'm always worried about using it because I think it's just being used so much in social media and in media that like it's losing its understanding. Right. But this idea that people think, well, I didn't have a traumatic childhood because I didn't have abuse, or I didn't have aggression, or I didn't have violence. Or maybe their needs were met well enough as far as their physiological needs, that they don't understand. It comes back to that confusion. Why should I be feeling this way? But when I start to peel back the layers with my clients, or even in my course, about the need for safety and security, psychological safety, or the need for love and belonging, and not having to shapeshift at all in order to be enough, even in our caretaker's home, that in and of itself, that alone, when disconnects us from ourself. And when we're disconnected from self, quote unquote, that's the trauma, right? And so that's the confusing part. I think people don't understand that many of us, I shouldn't say we all, but a large percentage, I would almost say majority of us, grew up in households where there were, what I say, unspoken rules, unwritten contracts that have been trickled down from generation to generation that actually really are the myth of normal, because the way that we were being raised was not normal for the nervous system, but it might have been normal for your culture, your family unit, your block, your neighborhood, your community, wherever, whatever it is. But it's not normal for having that sense of safety of being enough. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I hope people that are listening to this really, really understand and kind of feel normal in that we all have a painted picture of what normal is. And the more we peel down those layers, it's more of the question of not saying, why is this happening? Why am I doing this? I often tell my clients, why wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Based on what you told me, based on how you grew up, based on all the messages, based on how unsafe you felt just being you.
Right.
Why wouldn't you?
Right. I always say it was the best normal response for the most abnormal circumstance.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
I love that.
And so we talk about, well, what other things would you have been able to do? Like, what a brilliant adaptation at the time. And I think this is why I'm so bold with just putting "You're Not Broken" right on my homepage of my website, because people have been taught you shouldn't feel that way, or this shouldn't be the way that you're still remembering it or sensing it or processing it. And so we're constantly told, no, you're doing it the wrong way. It should be this, it shouldn't be that. And it leaves somebody feeling deficient and broken. And then unfortunately, if they end up in a mental health system where then they are given a disorder as part of their label, it just kind of further confirms something that's not necessarily accurate. And it really, it's like my soapbox. It breaks my heart. I just want to scream from the top of my lungs, like, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. Like, there's so many things that have happened to people where they've actually, this is what I've learned. We gaslight ourselves. Oh, well, it wasn't that bad. Well, everybody else had it that way, or, everybody else in my family. And so we deny ourselves our own reality.
Yeah. So
And
why not go deeper, right? Why not go deeper into what's beneath all of this, the root cause of
because
it?
I think you and I love, this is why I had you on my podcast. We are willing to look at the deeper root, but not everybody goes to the root cause. I mean, look, I was in therapy from age 15 until I was 42 years old, on and off, not straight through, but that's almost 30 years. Yeah. And during those 30 years, I don't think I had a day where I was not drowning in anxiety. This is why I continually went. Nobody attempted to get to the root cause in 30 years, not one person. I mean, it takes my breath away just to think about that. So that's why I'm so passionate to help people get to the root cause, understand how their core beliefs form, get them to understand they can come up with a new belief system now. Like, we don't have to stay with that belief system. Let's look at what happened. Let's honor it. Let's honor the parts of us that decided to make these brilliant adaptations, right? Whether it's people pleasing or no boundary setting or deprioritizing ourselves or whatever it is that we did in survival. So we feel accepted, or that we feel like we have control over a sense of safety or whatever it is, and then honor that time in our life and say, okay, what would I like to do now going forward? But we have to close the loop on the first part in order to move forward. I feel like otherwise it's just sitting there still in this state where it still feels like it has to keep you safe all the time, your nervous system. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love the digging deep and the safety and creating that map, the internal map of how to navigate life, because this is really what we have never been taught. And you and I talked about it on your podcast about having all the puzzle pieces, but not really sure how to put it all together. And when we finally understand and we finally have that clarity on a deeper level, it's like everything makes sense. And any situation in life that comes our way, we have a way of navigating it. There's nothing that's going to surprise you or stump you in a way where you're like, oh my God, my life is falling apart now. So that really brings me to your calm code.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about.
Well, it's like you gain this knowledge, right? And then you're like, how do I get this to as many people as possible? Because we work with people one-on-one, and I love my one-to-one clients, but there's, again, this deep need to sing it from the rooftops. Like, it can be different. So I built this course, and I try to keep it small because we know that healing happens in a safe and secure container. So I don't like to make it a really wide, big group. So it's a group of 8 people. And it's 8 weeks where we meet every single week for 2 hours. And it's a combination of what I'm going to call psychoeducation and holding space. So I take them through this 8-week journey, and the whole goal is to have a different relationship with anxiety. The actual course is called the Calm Code, Healing Anxiety from Within, but HEAL is a framework that I developed, and HEAL stands for something as a way to gain a better relationship with yourself. It's very rooted in parts work. So we kind of cover an understanding of what is trauma. And I love that first week, because first thing I have them do is take 3 minutes and write down what their definition of trauma is. And I have people share if they want to share. And then I give them an hour and a half of a different understanding of what trauma is. And then I have them redo that exercise. And then they can share again before we get into our reflective practice. And that shift alone is huge, because I don't think people really understand what trauma is. Trauma is an unhealed wound at its most basic core. And then we get to say, well, what kind of wound did I have? And was it a gaping wound, or was it 1,000 paper cuts on the soul? Then we start to dive into the core beliefs a little bit. We move into intergenerational trauma because we were talking about the puzzle pieces in our last. I just don't think that you can not take how our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents were raised and what they went through and what their experiences were. We can't take that out of the equation of understanding ourselves. I move them back into these core beliefs and these emotional imprints that I was talking about. And then we start to move into the nervous system. And then the last 3 weeks have to do with parts work. Because as we're building up, now we understand how our body works, what's happening in and around us, where our body is constantly trying to just keep us alive, right? I say assess, address, and adapt. And now, if we understand that, how are these different parts of us that develop through all of this working? How does that line up with your nervous system? By the time the 8 weeks is done, they should have a much different interpretation and understanding of what anxiety is. And you can't heal what you don't understand. When I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder at age 32, and I'll be 54 in a couple of weeks. Okay. So this was over 20 years ago. There's a sense of hopelessness that comes from a diagnosis. It's like, oh, I have generalized anxiety disorder. Oh, I come from a long line of anxious people. Oh, this, that, the other thing. There's really nothing I can do but take this medication. And I did take the medication, and truth be told, it did help. It did help until it didn't, because it was like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. When I started to learn the things that I started to learn that I teach in the Calm Code, I moved from hopeless meaning I'm kind of trapped, like this is my destiny. I'm always going to be an anxious person because I have this generalized anxiety disorder. The only thing I can do is manage it with medication. Because even the therapists were like discharging me saying, I don't know why you're here because there's really nothing you haven't learned about yourself. And I'm like, well, then why am I still so stuck? And move over to this understanding of how neuroscience and the nervous system and polyvagal theory and parts work that moved me from helpless to hopeful. Of like, wow, I can have a completely different relationship with myself. When I feel more safe in my own body, my anxiety has no room. There's no need for it. So my goal is to take all that knowledge, put it into this course so people can go from that hopeless feeling of like, I'm never going to get better, quote unquote, to really hopeful and have actual tools that they can implement in the moment and knowledge that they can put to use in the moment of having a different lens through which to see why this activation is coming up inside their nervous system.
And what do you believe or that holds people back most from being their authentic selves?
I mean, I'm a parts work practitioner. So my personal feeling is that we all have access to ourself. It's just that sometimes, and you can use different language, right? It's shadowed out, it's dimmed out. But the reality is, I like to use the analogy of an orchestra. Have you ever been to a symphony or an orchestra or philharmonic?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you get to that philharmonic, let's use that as an example. If you get there before it kicks off and you're sitting in your seat and everyone's tuning, what does that sound like to you?
It sounds a bit off.
Yeah, it sounds like chaos,
Yes.
like organized chaos, right? And what I see is you have these different parts of the philharmonic or these different sections, and each one is just trying to be heard, right? They're trying to hear themselves as they're tuning their instrument. So you've got your wings, your percussion, your horns, you might even have strings, and they're all just trying to be heard. So they're going to be able to do the best that they can. But the moment the conductor walks out, everybody knows to settle into their spot. And then the conductor leads this beautiful harmony, and you can't have this beautiful harmony without every single part of the philharmonic. So the way I see it is when we're dysregulated, it's kind of like the time when everyone's tuning. all of our parts that have developed in our survival over the years are all desperately trying to do their best for you and to try to be heard. And often they're fighting for like the mic inside our body. And they don't believe that our self energy knows enough to be in control.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to become the conductors. We're trying to get ourselves to kind of come back out of the shadows and lead from within. This is the way I see it. When we can do that, all of our parts are like, she's not going to get rid of me. Sometimes we might need a little people pleasing in here. Sometimes we might be in a position where we don't need to set a boundary. Sometimes we might be in a position where we need to deprioritize ourselves for whatever reason. So I'm not going to be kicked to the curb here, but I actually don't need to be the one in charge of this entire group anymore. Let me take a seat back and let me do what I do best and let her lead. So that's how I see self. I see self as kind of coming out of the shadows when we finally reconnect and we can get our parts to quiet down a little bit. And when we can get that balance, it's very harmonious inside the nervous system. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I love that. So after those 8 weeks that you work with people, what is the shift that you see in them? What are they reporting?
You know what's so interesting? Because we just got through week 5 of this current cohort. So I'm always asking at the beginning, like, how is what you learned up to this point? And I'm hearing things like, oh, I went to work the other day and I needed to be in a meeting. And normally I'd go in really dysregulated and really nervous. But this time I decided to prioritize my needs. And I stated my needs up front. And I had a boundary, which I've never had before. And I walked out feeling so empowered. And that was actually after like week 1 and week 2. Or I had another person in the class say, my brother visited me today and we went over week 3, which is intergenerational trauma. And we got to talk about what our lived experience was and how that's actually impacting us in ways that we didn't understand. So, I think we both will agree, gaining a sense of awareness is one of the keys to healing, because again, we can't heal what we don't understand. So just helping them generate awareness, giving them the courage to dip their toe into something, seeing a situation differently through a different lens, they're already feeling like, oh my gosh, I can have more agency within myself. Because that's what happens when we're riddled with anxiety. We lose a sense of agency. We feel like we have no control over our own body. That's why we feel, I'm going to put in quotes, broken, because we don't feel like it's not about control, but it's like we've lost our agency over our emotional health.
So being the conductor and being in charge. And I like how you say that she leads, right? That
yeah,
the adult part of ourselves, the who we are, the you inside you is the one leading the orchestra. And when the parts get a little too loud, a little too dysregulated, you're the one that can set the boundaries and put back in order and calm yourself down.
When I started putting this into practice for myself, I had a moment, maybe it was about a year ago, where there was something that was happening in my life that left me uneasy. There was a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability. And I think we love certainty and predictability, right? So when we don't have it, we tend to feel like we're losing control. So that's where this anxiety can often kick in. So I didn't know what to do with myself. I had this anxiety building and I decided to go for a walk. And I'm out walking and I have a headset on and I'm talking to myself. And I legitimately say out loud, where there's no one else around, we need a company-wide meeting and I need all of my parts in the conference room stat. I visualized all my parts like walking in begrudgingly into this conference room. And I know this is like esoteric for people that don't know parts work, but I had all my parts walk in. I visualized myself standing at the front of this long conference table, at the head of it. And I asked everybody to sit down. And you can just feel the energy, right, of it. Like, and I said, listen, I understand this is a stressful time. And I understand you're trying to do this for me and you're trying to do that for me. And it all has to stop. I need everybody. I get it. I understand. But when you're all so active, I cannot think. When you're all so active, I cannot engage. I freeze. So I'm going to ask everybody to stay inside this conference room. I'm going to leave. If I need any single one of you, I will come in and get you. You're all useful. You're all valid. You're all worthy of having a role in my nervous system, but not right now. I'm going to go do this. I can't even tell you. My whole nervous system shifted. And it's not like I had the answers. It's not as though I knew what to do, but I just needed the noise to stop. Sometimes when we're in this anxiety storm, it's like the inmates are running the asylum, right? Or that orchestra is like chaotically tuning up. I just needed to bring all my parts together and be like, you're all going to stay in here, have a nice little lunch. I'm going out and I'm going to try to approach this problem myself. But you guys are you're paralyzing me. I can't make a move. I can't even think.
Yeah. And I'm laughing about this, Stacey, because I've had the same visual
Oh my God. That's great.
We have so many similar stories, and Stacey and I haven't known each other for that long, but I'm just giggling here because I have had the same scenario explained to my clients in terms of how I've summoned all my parts. And this is part of our ego, our subconscious beliefs, limiting beliefs that kind of show up in different personas. You know, we have the little one that needs a lot of attention, and then we have the other one that's just really loud that we have to maybe ignore sometimes, and then the one that needs the extra soothing and extra care, and all these different parts of the ego, that the false part of ourselves that's not feeding us accurate information. They all have to be in check, and we learn to integrate that. This is something that Stacey also does, is she helps integrate these parts of ourselves through parts work. That's what she does. And I'm thinking about raising children, and I kind of want to shift just a little bit of gear here. I often say our transformations change generations.
Absolutely.
And you talk about intergenerational work. How can we help our children know, recognize, and trust their voice of their true self as leaders or as parents or as influences of children? Because I often look at my girls, I'm like, how am I going to do this? You know, I try my best, but I have these high expectations in myself that it's supposed to look a certain way.
I think here's the thing. Every shift we make from the generation before is a good shift, right? Every shift towards what we want. We can't strive for perfect because we're in this fluid situation. So there's no end result. It's all process, especially raising kids, right? But I think many people who are, say, 40 and older, and I can't really speak for 30 and under, grew up with parents who were not allowed to share their emotions and their feelings by their parents. Okay, so we had great grandparents raising our grandparents from a certain point of view, our grandparents raising our parents, where maybe we're just not really talking about our problems, we're not really talking out our feelings. And so when our generation, these 40, 50, 60-year-olds, were going to our parents with our challenges, we were told, just let it go. And I think we were told to just let it go. Don't worry about it. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Don't do this. Is because they actually did not know how to hold the space. So instead of like showing any sign of weakness as a parent and saying, I don't know how to do this for you, they just taught us to cut ourselves off from our emotions. Now we are raising these new kids, And everybody's going to this other extreme side where tell me all of your feelings and it's okay to have all these feelings. And we're like shifting all the way over here, but we may have not done our work yet. So we're doing it from an anxious state. So what I'm always telling parents who are coming to me is, to your point, when we can have this regulation, there's this transformation. We need to work as ourselves in this 40, 50, 60-year-old zone to be regulated, to then hold space for our child and just listen to what they're saying. Don't question it. The worst thing that can be said to a child is, you shouldn't feel that way. Or why would you even feel that way? Or that's ridiculous. That when they're talking to you from self and they're trying to express themselves and it gets shut down, they're just going to learn over and over again, that's not working for me. And it leaves them feeling so horrible. Parts of them are not going to allow that anymore. Yeah. So I think it's just getting really comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's very hard as a parent to watch our kids be in pain. But they're not going to learn how to deal with pain unless we learn how to help them process the pain, not avoid it, not circumvent it, not divert from it, sit with it.
Yeah. And entering into that conference room, as you're talking about, being the leader of the meeting and listening to all the parts is, in essence, the same presence that we would encourage to have with our children, in really being present with what they're saying, holding that safe space for them so they know that that's okay. Otherwise, their board meeting will start,
I'll give you an example.
Chanting.
Over the summer, one of my kids had like a pretty significant biking accident. And he needed to go to the emergency room, and he ended up in an OR setting for 6 hours and needed a lot of stitches. And, as a trauma care practitioner, what I will always say is there are events that are traumatic in the moment, but trauma is what happens as the event is over and it continues to bother you in mind, body, psyche. That's the trauma, right? So I'm watching my son go through this traumatic experience where I cannot protect him from getting wounds cleaned and getting stitches put in, and I'm watching his heart rate go boom, boom, boom. And I'm sure he's nervous and scared. And what's this looking like? And it was just a very traumatic experience. When it was done, meaning when all the doctors left the OR and it was just me, my husband, and my son, and he got emotional. Our initial instinct is to go sit by the side of our child and say, it's going to be okay. Don't cry. Don't worry about it. You did great. Don't worry about it. You're going to be okay. And I just thought to myself, that's my need for him to not be upset. But guess what? This was really upsetting. So I caught myself in like a nanosecond because it was just about to come out of my mouth. And I went over to him and I said, that was horrible. That sucked. You must have been so scared. It's over. And now you can just get it out. Everything you were feeling, everything you held on to that you didn't go through while they were in here, just let it out.
Oh, I love it. So really being there, right?
Just be there. Just hold the space. Don't say anything.
Yeah.
You don't need to do anything. You just need to let them process. It's okay for them to process. And it's funny because this morning I saw something in my Facebook memories from like a few years ago, and I was going to repost it. I just haven't had time yet. It's a video of a young girl laying in a driveway in the middle of a rainstorm, having a panic attack. And then I only know that that's what's happening because this is the caption. And you see a mom come into the driveway in her car. The daughter probably called her and said, I'm having a panic attack. I'm outside. The mom pulls in her car, gets out of the car, and just lays down next to the daughter and holds her hand in the rainstorm. And together they're just laying facing up in this rainstorm on the driveway. And that is a perfect example and illustration of what we need to do as parents. It is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
The quick and easy is, how can I just make it better? How can I take away their pain? That's the natural instinct. If you take away their pain, they never learn how to process pain.
We're human beings,
We're
right? Not
human
human
beings.
doings.
So, we as parents need to learn how to be uncomfortable with the space and the process of holding the space for big feelings. If we don't do it, we're going to raise kids that don't know how to process emotions, and we're going to have even a further anxious and anxious generation, which I can't possibly imagine, because this current generation is so anxious. So that would be my advice. You have to be regulated in order to hold the space.
I love that. The more regulated we become ourselves, the more present we're able to be there for our children.
Right.
The more present we can just be there without necessarily trying to solve and fix anything. The more patient we also get with our own being present with our parts. And I just love how that reflects. I once wrote a blog on this reflection and how we speak to our children and how we are with our children. It really reflects how we are with our inner child. And it just goes hand in hand. And I've seen it progress myself in my own development, and how beautiful it is. The more that we're able to show up for ourselves,
Right.
the more patience and space we can hold for our children as well. So thank you for that advice. I hope that really helped people to hear that. If you were to go back to a younger version of yourself, what would you want her to know about life?
Mm.
What was she not told?
Such a good question, because I'm thinking of, what age would I go back to?
What age would you go back to?
Right. Like, because I have eras. Like, I love this idea of an eras tour from Taylor Swift, because I have eras,
Sure. So what
I
comes to mind first?
Yeah, right. So I'm going to go to the one that was really having a hard time. All I would say to her is, listen to you. Don't abandon yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what she was doing. That's how we started this interview. I was that very, I'm going to put it in quotes, strong-willed girl, but it wasn't a very, it wasn't a welcomed thing. And I don't think I would tell her to do that any differently. It's just really hard to stick it out when everyone around you, there's two things that were happening. Everyone around me as an adult was asking me to abandon myself for their comfort. The second thing is, my now mindful self knows all of my friends had already self-abandoned. So I really was an outcast in many ways. And, I would just tell my younger self, just keep sticking it through. Just keep sticking it through. The one thing I wish I could have done differently, because it was so debilitating, was found a way, which would have been very hard in the environment I was in from age 11 to 18 or 20, to find a way to allow that smoke alarm to be not as sensitive, but actually in reality, it kind of needed to be. But it was really when I left the environment, and I thought leaving the environment would make a difference. And that's why I know these emotional imprints are so strong, because it didn't. So then I suffered, really suffered from age 20 to say 35, 40, with just this energy and this anxiety 24/7, well beyond. Right. So at that age, I'm talking 30 years ago, I would have loved to have been able to give her the understanding that I have now. You did the best you could with what you had when you had it. Let's learn some of these other things about yourself. So this part of you does not need to be so overactive. Like, I just had a go bag packed, ready to go in my nervous system 24/7.
Yeah. So it was really that idea of trusting yourself, even from very young. Like, don't abandon yourself, be who you are, even if people around you don't reflect it. And then trust yourself, trust your learnings, trust where you are headed into, in life, you're going exactly the direction that you need to
Yes,
be going.
just keep going. It's hard, it's so easy to stop going because it's so hard.
Yeah.
Especially when you're kind of a trailblazer or you're like a black sheep, like you don't have anybody else, you know, on that path with you. It's very easy to abandon it and just say, I'm just going to fit in with everyone else. But I knew that was going against me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Stacey. This has just been so amazing, and it's incredible how you show up for people and what you're able to offer people in really reclaiming themselves, feeling more free, feeling like who they are. Everybody, you know, we have all the links, and if you want to connect directly with Stacey, I'll make sure that you have all her information. Signing up for her 8-week course, I want you to subscribe to her podcast. Just amazing messages and interviews that she has on there. Any final parting words that you have?
I would just say that if anyone's listening that's really been struggling, find somebody who knows how to hold the space. And like Trina said earlier, and this is the way I do it, helps you put the pieces of the puzzle from all the years, lay them out, and get curious. Like curiosity is a huge part of this whole process, process. Get curious, be willing to be open and understand how some of these lived experiences impacted us in ways that maybe we had not allowed ourselves to accept. And you don't have to stay there for a long time. You just have to be able to visit it and understand how you chose in a brilliant way to address it and adapt in the moment. And that you can actually choose to address it and adapt to it differently when you have more knowledge and you have more agency inside your life.
I love that. Oh my goodness. I could listen to you all day. Your voice is just mesmerizing. You're so knowledgeable of what you do. You can tell that you work with this for many, many years. Just not only your soul, but just your knowledge and your wisdom about personal transformation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for joining us for this powerful conversation with Stacey. If there's one thing I hope you to take away from today's episode is that you are not broken.
Yeah.
You can't heal what you don't understand, and understanding begins with compassion and empathy, like Stacey talked about, the willingness to slow down, to listen, and to reconnect with the you inside you. And Stacey's work really reminds us that healing isn't about fixing what's wrong. It's about remembering what's always been whole within us the whole time. So if today's episode spoke to you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need this message. And if you'd like to learn more about Stacey's work, I'll make sure I have all the links below so you can connect with her directly. Until next time, keep listening to the wisdom within, trusting your truth, and creating space for your calm to rise. This is You Inside You, and I'm Trina Schmidt, reminding you that healing always starts from the inside out.